This is Renewing Faith Radio with Pastor Jason Gold of Regeneration Calvary Chapel in Sandpoint, Idaho.
In your presence, darkness hides.
What the Lord wants is He wants to wipe away the little gods that we have in our lives, and how it is easy to put something on the mantle and all of a sudden you don't even realize it's there, but it just keeps growing and having a stronger hold on one's life. And we see that with addiction, but even little things that maybe they're not addictions, that we're just not aware. And God is faithful to expose those. And He's also a gentle God.
Are there hidden idols quietly standing between you and God? In today's message, Pastor Jason invites us to uncover these subtle barriers to our spiritual growth. What may look insignificant to others can loom large in your own journey, becoming major stumbling blocks. God, in His gentleness, often uses these challenges to guide your steps in a new direction. Stay attuned to His voice and gentle nudges. If He stirs your heart or mind about something, whether seen or unseen, listen closely and respond. God desires to remove these hidden idols. Now turn in your Bible to the book of Exodus chapter 12, as Pastor Jason begins his message, Trusting God in Our Weakness.
Well, if you would please turn to Exodus chapter 12. So Exodus chapter 12, it brings us into that final episode of the children of Israel being delivered. It finally happens after 7 times of Moses saying to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." It actually happens. The final plague comes, and all the firstborn in Egypt are killed, and except for those that have the blood of the lamb on the lintel and the doorposts. And so you could just imagine this scene. These are some supernatural things have been taking place, and no doubt the faith of the people have grown, and those that have had a hard heart, it grows harder, as we have seen Pharaoh hardening his heart and the Lord confirming that hardening. Lord, help us from falling into that category. And so we've seen this deliverance process, and usually deliverance in our own lives is just that. It's a process. Some people are set free overnight or in a moment, and the Lord is, He does that. But sometimes people have to endure. They have to go through difficult times, repercussions, not judgments, they're repercussions. And those repercussions strengthen the inner person, the inner man, the inner woman. And, whether it be by tragedy or disaster, what the Lord wants is He wants to wipe away the little gods that we have in our lives, and how it is easy to put something on the mantle, and all of a sudden you don't even realize it's there, but it just keeps growing and having a stronger hold on one's life. And, we see that with addiction, but even little things that maybe they're not addictions, that we're just not aware. And God is faithful to expose those. And He's also a gentle God. With the things that He'll put on our heart, we're just like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. And it may not even be a direct violation of Scripture. It might not be, thus saith the Lord, shall not. But for you, it's sin. For you, it's something that you shouldn't be doing. Because there are things in people's lives that, they might be stressing out, they might be spinning around in their minds, and I might be on the other side of it, just being like, just let it go. Accept God's forgiveness and move on. But then there are things in my life that I have no doubt if I shared with you, you'd be like, why don't you just let it go, And so we have these different things, and we're all different. However, the Bible tells us that all things are common to men. There's nothing new under the sun as far as what we're going to deal with, the struggles that we're going to go through. But the truth of it is that life happens. And sometimes the Lord allows difficulties to come into our lives to change our lives, to change our directions. Sometimes a loss of a job. The loss of a job might be because of something that we might have been doing or not doing. The loss of a job just might be circumstantial in that the Lord is going to allow it to happen to get you into the proper trajectory that he wants you in. And I mean, when you think about vocation and income and the Lord opening up doors and closing doors, I've seen it in my life just multiple times. I'm more of a vocational mutt, with just having all these different jobs. And, I worked at my first job, I was a busboy. Then what did I do? Oh, then I worked for Vaughn's and I was a bagger, and then I cleaned the floors. And then I worked at Wells Fargo. I took 10 key and typing in high school. And so I learned to type in the 10 key calculator thing. So I got a job as a senior making $10 an hour. Yeah, that was big time back in 1948. And so the Lord uses these things, but then there had been times where I worked in a hotel and then worked for Marriott, and then I worked for a distribution company, and we distributed bottles. Then I worked for a manufacturer where we manufactured bottles. And then I worked for another distributor. There's more money in distribution than manufacturing. So it ended up things started to get more robotic, and they started just cutting people out of the scenario. And one time I came home with a box, and my wife was 8 months pregnant, I believe, with Isabel. And I walked in the door, and she saw the box. She looked at me, and I think I started crying, because it was like we had 1 week of health insurance left, but the Lord allows those things to take place to move us in directions that he wants to move us. And I was out of work for a couple months as far as traditional work. And then I ended up cleaning the bottom and the top of sailboats and out in the sun down in Huntington Beach. That was lots of fun and not. And I was getting paid $10 an hour for that. And, I was just always willing to, work. It didn't matter what type of job it was. And my wife was going through the ads, and she was like, what does he even qualify for? And so she was like, janitorial engineer, nope. Pooper scooper, nope. So she's trying to figure out where I land as far as skill set, and there wasn't much. So she found a job at a computer training school for inside sales, because having customer service background through the Marriott, and I did that with the distribution companies. And so I became a inside sales guy for this computer company. And I was doing that, I was like, I hated it. You're making all these cold calls, and it's like this pressure of commission, and I was like, I don't like this. And they opened up positions for instructors. And so then I applied to be an instructor, went through the training to be an instructor, and then I ended up instructing in computer classes 4 days a week, 8 hours a day, teaching these computer classes. And I knew the Lord was doing it to prepare me to teach. Because in high school, I was a floundering idiot. And just kind of my whole life was about sports, and in my mind it was like my career path is the pros. That's what I was going to do, and that obviously didn't happen. So the Lord just used my path, and it was through the different jobs and the different trials, the different layoffs, and different financial tragedies, that he ended up getting us into an area where we really didn't have a whole lot of money. We had food stamps, and we were just like, we actually had assistant housing, and I really felt like a Class A loser. And then we got a phone call to go into ministry, and that was back in 2002. And we've been in ministry ever since. And so it's just been a journey. And the first part of it, ministry in of itself has its own challenges, but the whole idea of, working as a busboy, and then, cleaning the floors at Vaughn's, and doing 10 key at Wells Fargo, and all these different jobs, the Lord allowed it in my life to prepare me for the land, so to speak, that he wanted me to go and minister in. And it was quite the journey. It wasn't a short journey. It wasn't an easy journey. And it was a trying journey. But God is faithful. And we need to see the Lord in all of it. That just because you feel like you're in a wilderness does not mean that God has forsaken you. No, the Lord is allowing this that you might be refined, that you might be able to stand the heat within whatever the refinement is, so that way the impurities burn and what surfaces is what is pure and usable. We all need that in our lives. And so when we allow the gods of this age to get into our lives, the Lord's faithful to allow natural repercussions or spiritual spankings to take place. You know, it could be addiction, it could be drugs, alcohol, pornography, it could be materialism. Social media is an addiction now. People spend hours and hours and hours on social media. And it's called screen addiction. And so these are just things that are real, and God is faithful to get them out of our lives. And so sometimes we find ourselves trusting in the things that we can manufacture, we can earn it, we can develop it, and we put all of our faith in our skill sets rather than putting our faith in the Lord. And then our skill sets become our little God, that I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. I'm a capable person. That might be so, but if your trust is in yourself, the Lord is a jealous God. And if you are His, He doesn't want to compete for your heart. Exodus 34:14 says, "For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is a jealous God." So I want to be on the right side of the Lord and not be chased down by jealousy. We know what jealousy does in relationships. Jealousy can cause big problems. And if the Lord is jealous for you and is causing big problems in your life, guess who wins? The Lord wins. And so let us learn vicariously through other people. Amen. All right, so we're going to pick it up here in Exodus 12:29. And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon. So the dungeon being like the prison, and all the firstborn of livestock. And so Pharaoh rose in the night, he, all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. In every single home, there was one dead, except for those that put the blood of the lamb on the post and the lintel, the crossbeam. And so we see here, after tragedy, from tragedy to tragedy to tragedy, that now we see the will of Pharaoh broken. Like he is busted up. In verse 31, it says, "Then he called for Moses," he being Pharaoh, "and Aaron by night, and said, 'Rise, go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as you have said. Also take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also.'" Verse 33, and it says, that is like the people that you hang out with, that you know they're not Christians, and they get so irritated with you. Like, yeah, fine, let's go to church, or you go do your church thing. But yet they're like, but if you want to pray a blessing upon me, I'll accept that. But I don't want the obedience part. And we're going to see that in this journey with the Israelites when the mandate of circumcision comes up. So he goes on to say, verse 33, it says, "And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste. For they said, 'We shall all be dead.'" So they don't know what's going on. They're just like, get them all out lest we all die. And so the people took their dough, so they took all of their money, just kidding, So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. So here they're finally given the permission to leave, but it was in haste. They had to move rapidly. They didn't have much time to go. They had to leave stuff behind. And this is just a simple application. Hey, when the Lord says go, it's time to go. And if you need to leave stuff behind, leave it behind, because God is a God of supply. He owns the cattle of 1,000 hills. And if all he has to do is sell a couple cattle to provide for you, do you think that he can do that? So many times God has provided for my family unconventionally. We are so in this process of clocking in, clocking out, and production. And so we earn income based on performance. But mercy has nothing to do with performance. Grace has nothing to do with performance. It has everything to do with God's faithfulness. And so there's times where I was laid off and I was cleaning the boats, we were short on rent. 2 months in a row, we received a check for $1,000 to cover our rent. And it wasn't, I was working, but we were short. And there'd been times where, groceries, gift card, whatever, that special gift. And verse 35, it says, now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Do you think that as an Israelite, as a Jew, that, these people, they're just like, get them out of here unless we all die. And the Jews were commanded, it was a prophecy by Abraham, but it was something that they were told to do, go ask for gifts. You can imagine the people like, whatever you need, just get out of here, right? And so the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians so that they granted them what they requested. Thus, they plundered the Egyptians. And so this was foretold in Genesis 15:14, some 600 years prior to this time. And it says, and also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward, they shall come out with great possessions. Isn't that amazing? Just God is faithful. And we just need to see, if God is faithful to Israel, he's going to be faithful to his church. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. In verse 37, it says, then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. And so we're going to see here that in Numbers, that the age of the men was anywhere from 20 and above as far as men are concerned. And these are the men that would eventually form to be the army for Israel. But then when you include the women and children, it's a guesstimation of anywhere from 2 to 3 million people fleeing from Egypt. 2 to 3 million people. I mean, you know what it's like, if you have 3 kids and they're all, under 4, that's nuts. We have our grandchildren now. We have Gabriel, who's a year and a half-ish, and then new Rosie. And so they're in like 2 totally different spectrums of life. One doesn't even care that I exist. The other one wants to hit me in the face. I love it. I like the hitting in the face. I don't like the one that doesn't care about me right now. Anyway, women and children and 2 to 3 million people. Some commentators have issue with this number because they say it's impossible. And that is true. When you think of armies that go out in masses, when we think about, 100,000 soldiers moving to, take over a land, we're talking about hygiene, we're talking about food, we're talking about medical, everything has to be taken care of. And so 2 to 3 million people. And so what's cool about this is, yes, it is impossible, especially sojourners traveling like pilgrims. They don't have much. They had to leave really, really fast. And it just shows that God is faithful. It shows how awesome he is. It shows that when he has a plan, it doesn't matter what conventionally is happening in our lives. If we are abiding in God's will, we don't need to worry about the bread that's going to be at our next meal. We just don't. God does the impossible. We know this. Luke 1:37, it says, "For with God nothing will be impossible." And we see that story after story after story. In verse 38, it says, "A mixed multitude went up with them, and flocks and herds and great deal of livestock." So this mixed multitude implies that it wasn't just Jews that went on the journey. That possibly, because the idea was if you had put the lamb's blood over your doorpost and lintel, then the plague didn't hit your home. And so these people were saved. Now also, this could imply that there were more than just the Israelites that were prisoners and slaves. And so this is a mixed multitude. And this mixed multitude in numbers gives some complications to the children of Israel when they start, it says specifically in Numbers 11 that it's the mixed multitude that starts complaining about the food that they had back in Egypt. They start complaining about the manna, making it difficult for the Israelites. You know what it is when you're around a complainer? Then you start complaining, right? Misery loves company. And so we need to be careful who we hang out with. That's obvious. But here, this multitude, this mixed multitude, starts causing problems. And so, the simple application is we need to be careful who we hang out with. There's an old adage that says, you are who you hang out with. And so if you're hanging around with a bunch of bozos, then guess what? You're a bozo. You're going to start doing the things that they do. Oh, I'm witnessing to them. Yeah, but if you're going to the bar with them and throwing down some beers and cursing like they are, then you're not being set apart. You're actually being a missionary to keep them away from the church, because we need to be set apart and shine the light. So here, these are the people that when the rubber meets the road, they don't have faith in the Lord. They don't trust in the Lord. They're just going through the motions. They want the benefits of God, but they don't want the testings of God. And so we need to be really careful, just as this mixed group of people caused some issues. In verse 39, it says, "And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves." So they couldn't even grab the leaven. They just had to go. Verse 40 says, "Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, as that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt." Verse 42, "It is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord, a solemn observance for all the children of Israel throughout their generation." So God intended this to be a type of memorial of redemption, a memorial of delivery. It's an Old Testament cross-like experience, pointing to the cross, where we have redemption through Jesus Christ on the cross. And here, the Lord has delivered them.
Thanks for tuning in to this insightful edition of Renewing Faith Radio, where Pastor Jason is teaching some valuable things from the book of Exodus. If you're familiar with the story of Jacob, Joseph, and the 12 tribes of Israel from Genesis, you see how it was all part of God's plan for the Israelites to relocate to Egypt so that their family line would be preserved during the famine. But this season was just for a time. Although it was difficult, discouraging, and oppressive, becoming slaves to the Egyptians, it was not forever. God brought them out when His timing was right. Do you feel like this world is like a larger form of Egypt? It can be hard, trying, and oppressive at times. But God has you here for a season, and in His time, He'll bring you out. The promised land in Exodus was an actual place on earth, but God's promised land for us is something far greater and beyond this finite earth. It gives us something to look forward to, whether you're in a place of feast or famine. If there's anything that you're in need of prayer for during this time, you're welcome to fill out a prayer request form on our website. Go to renewingfaithradio.com and fill out the form, or send us a note of encouragement. Renewing Faith Radio is an outpouring of the ministry going on at Regeneration Calvary Chapel in Sandpoint, Idaho. We look forward to seeing you at one of our services. Go to renewingfaithradio.com to find out our service times and directions. We thank you for listening, and we look forward to the next edition of Renewing Faith Radio.